Welcome. This is Dr. Gary Salton, Chief of R&D and creator of IOP Technology. This video reports on a large-scale research effort addressing organizations of all types, and here is a preview of the conclusions of that research. The numbers tell us that the organizations underlying our society form a well-defined system. That system has autonomic components able to handle day-to-day demands, both long and short-term, without supervision. And it has a hierarchical superstructure able to handle opportunities and exposures that lie outside of this autonomic structure. Finally, this model is not a cartoon. All of the variables are measurable, and the relationships are defined in quantifiable terms. So if this is of interest to you, let's begin with the numbers. The IOP database of 76,442 respondents is the core of the study. Those respondents work in all areas of business, medicine, government, education, nonprofits, and even churches and social service agencies. And they are domiciled in 115 of the 196 different countries in the world. Now, there is no such thing as a truly random sample in large-scale social science research. However, the large size and wide distribution of our sample mitigates at least some of the issues that might arise. For example, the range of titles included limits the effects of rank-based bias. The wide scope of organizations reduces the possibility of an industry-based bias. And since the sample includes 58% of the countries on Earth, the influence of a nation-based bias is dampened. While not perfect, the sample is probably a reasonable estimate of our common world. A world with different firms, industries, and social sectors interacting, and together creating an environment within which we all live and on which we all depend. The prism we will use to examine this data is the classic input-process-output model that is the foundation of IOP technology. So, let's use it to take an initial cut at our data. Most of the people in our sample rely on facts to make decisions on unfamiliar situations. Facts take time to gather, evaluate, and assemble. A minority of our population is willing to work on inference without the need for explicit knowledge of the links involved. Some flexibility is built into the input side of our model. On the output side, a minority is willing to take immediate action on new and unfamiliar issues, but the majority will opt for preparatory, thought-based activities. Preparatory assessments and plans take time to prepare, thus adding to the demands embedded on the input side of the model. The combination of detailed input and thought-based output increases the certainty of outcome at the price of time and effort. And our population appears to be willing to pay that price. The process box tells the input side what to look for in light of the targeted output, and it tells the output side what is possible with the input available. Process allows action, thought, inference, and facts all to be called upon to make the on-the-fly adjustments we need to navigate the variability of life. However, process is not free. It takes time and effort. So, people tend to reuse process strategies that have worked for them in the past. This makes response variability a bit sticky. Our sampled population is likely to resist altering a position once that position has been adopted. IOP can leverage the qualities we have identified in our crude opening model to enhance predictive accuracy, which it does by pairing the different input and output options. Each of these combinations produce unique behaviors which we can see in each other. IOP calls these combinations strategic styles, all of which are measurable. So, let's measure them. Each slice of this pie represents the likelihood that our population will actually exhibit that particular style behavior when confronting an unfamiliar issue. Familiar issues have already been subject to an assessment at some time in the past. and their response is now on automatic. You can view the first 6 minutes of the Team Tension video if you want a more detailed explanation of styles. But for now, let's look at each of the pieces. The largest piece of the pie is the hypothetical analyzer style. This strategy seeks out objective data to create a preparatory response, a plan or assessment. The next most likely response to a new situation is also to gather objective data, but to use it to select a trusted procedure that has worked in the past. This is the logical processor style, and it is responsible for getting most things done in our day-to-day world. Both of these dominant strategies use hard, detailed input, and both use trusted methods to assess them. This tends to create a high certainty of outcome. This kind of fact-based certainty makes decisions sticky. There is little need to revisit a settled matter, especially one which is based on hard factual data. So, we have a situation where the response to new issues will tend to be somewhat sluggish, and the decisions made will tend to be final. But new exposures can surface, and new opportunities can arise. Our sampled population has a way of addressing these situations, the relational innovator style. About 23% of our sample looks for solutions to new issues that lie outside of known methods or procedures. They do this by using inference to fill in the blanks in data, or to draw unusual associations between data elements. But the output is still thought-based ideas, options, and theories. A sense of excitement may be created, but the speed of response has not been accelerated. The last piece of the pie uses inferential input and action output to produce a fast assessment and conclusive action. The reactive stimulator, or RS style, trades certainty for speed of response. And the RS style exists because it is needed. There are situations where speed of response is more important than certainty. There are also situations where the consequences of potential failure are not severe. Risk can be tolerated. The RS style is a fast, low-cost strategy for addressing these kinds of issues. Overall, our sampled population is likely to be cautious in formulating a decision, with a focus on preparatory action. But people favoring these styles have the same IQ as everyone else. If they encounter an opportunity or exposure that meets their criteria, they will accept and implement appropriate action. A cautious posture does not mean paralysis. What it does mean is that we have a built-in linchpin that keeps our institutions from being whipsawed by transient events, while retaining a provision for a guarded pace of change. And with that, we have built the first autonomic component of our organizational model. No supervision required. It just works. However, not everything is that simple. Some situations require a series of steps to resolve, and not all of those steps will yield to the same strategic style. IOPT handles this by pairing styles that have an input or output commonality. These combinations of styles are designated as strategic patterns. If you want to learn more about how patterns are created, you can view this 8-minute YouTube video. In the meantime, we can test the pattern concept as a measurement tool. We can take our sampled population of 77,000 or so people, sort them into our pattern categories, and average their style scores. The result is that we find that people rely on their primary and secondary styles about 70% of the time, regardless of the pattern that they have adopted. IOPT patterns appear to be a reliable measuring stick. The intervals being measured are the same, regardless of the style to which they are applied. However, the 5,549 different organizations in our sample do not need all of the patterns in the same proportion. The conservator pattern fills the greatest need. its HA and LP components provide a reliable, cautious, dedicated, and consistent approach. The conservator pattern is perfect for handling the lifeblood day-to-day issues of an organization. The perfecter and changer patterns both serve as adjustment mechanisms. They generate new options. One will validate these options with analysis, the other with experimentation. The least need is for the performer firefighters. There are just not that many fires happening on a day-to-day basis. So, what's the difference between the short-run style and long-run pattern behaviors? Well, when we looked at the initial reaction to new issues, we found that the HA and LP style responses to be at about 61.9%. Now, when combined in the conservator pattern, they are at only 43.4%. What happened? Well, primary HA and LP styles do not always choose each other as their secondary styles. When they make different elections, different patterns are created. Two of these long-run patterns, perfecter and changer, are change-oriented. They both have an inferential input component, and together they tend to balance off the stability interests of the conservator. The performer strategy remains as the shock absorber of the system, willing to take fast action based on minimal input. Earlier, we discovered a short-term style mix that causes our sample population to favor a cautious, methodical, and detail-oriented approach. We can now add a long-term pattern mix that keeps a stability orientation, but which introduces a greater capacity for change and adjustment. These style and pattern mixes are baked into the organizational structure. They work whether anyone notices them or not. So, how do our organizations go about handling matters that go beyond these built-in capabilities? Well, that's why we have a hierarchy of people empowered with increasing levels of discretionary judgment. That judgment can be used to redirect the natural inclinations embedded in the style and pattern profiles of the organization. First-level management consists of supervisors, assistant managers, and others occupying the first rung on the managerial ladder. We can start our analysis by plotting the style commitments of these first-level managers. For example, 12% fall in the middle of the range of all first-level managers. We can then plot the commitment of everyone else in the organization with a dotted line on the same scale. And we can color in and measure the area where these two curves overlap. People in this overlapping area fit in either first-level management or other organizational roles with equal ease. We can also color in those areas where existing first-level managers differ from other people in the organization. Here we can see the proportion of first-level managers who are pulling the group toward a greater commitment to a particular posture, as well as where they are pulling the group toward giving less emphasis to a particular style posture. We can also flip our perspective and see the organization as pulling the first-level people in the opposite direction. This visualization gives us a quick perspective on the degree of pull involved in both directions. But we can also add measurement and see that about 90% of the organization can fit somewhere among first-level managers. And we can also measure the differences. The organizational population will see about 10% of the first-level managers as being a bit restrictive in their willingness to act quickly or entertain new ideas. And they are likely to be seen as emphasizing analysis and the rigorous use of established methods at about a 5% level. The overall picture of first-level management is that a significant 10% or so of them will be seen as restraining different forms of change, while only modestly pushing for more rigor. Together, these positions describe a focus on operational stability. Mid-level management consists of people holding titles of manager, director, and the like. Again, 9 out of 10, or 90%, have the same IOP profile as the rest of the sampled population. But the preferences of the 10% of mid-level managers shift from the first level in the direction of their poll. 6 to 10% are more likely to favor the instant action RS and the idea-oriented RI change-oriented styles. Their first-level counterparts were polling in the opposite direction. And our mid-managers are about 5% less likely to favor the detail-oriented LP and HA styles. Again, a pull in the opposite direction from first-level managers. This is the beginnings of an adjustment process. The shift is not strong, but it is visible. Senior management consists of C-level executives with policy-making authority. Typical titles include vice president, senior vice president, and executive vice president. The common area falls from mid-management's 90% to an 80% level. The 20% of senior executives who are different from everyone else are also 10 to 14% more committed to the change-oriented RI and RS styles, and are less reliant on the disciplined, detail-oriented HA and LP strategies, by roughly the same 10 to 15% amount. This is a change agent mix, but not one that is so far out as to be threatening to other organizational levels. Top management is all that remains. These are CEOs, board members, presidents, and similar titles who have the ability to influence the direction of the organization as a whole. The average commonality remains at about the 80% level as seen in senior management. But the drop in commonality in the idea-oriented RI style to 70% is a notable exception. About 18%, or 1 out of 5, top executives rely more on the RI style than do others in the population. And a lot of these top executives have a high commitment to this idea-generating style. Ideas, options, and alternatives appear to be a main currency of top management. There is also a notable drop from 11 to 7% in the responsive RS strategy, a 35% decline from senior management levels. And this makes sense. The RS is a risky strategy. At the top management level, this risk can threaten an entire organization. Greater consequence, more caution, less RS. Makes sense. However, the RS poll remains positive. The ideas of top management will carry an action imperative as they move down the organization. The picture painted by this evidence-based analysis is a system founded on differential information flows. The base of the system is defined by styles and is responsible for initial reactions to unfamiliar situations. It has a cautious orientation and resists being whipsawed by transient events. The next level is long-term patterns and is responsible for adjusting to new conditions. Both analysis and experimentation are available, but caution and stability remain the dominant stance. This long-term pattern component constantly interacts with the short-term style component. New issues constantly arise and past issues are discharged. These two levels represent the autonomic system. They keep the organizational heartbeat going without any need for guidance. The hierarchical management structure introduces a level of conscious control. The role of hierarchy is to call out specific capacities of the base to meet situations that might arise. This first-level hierarchy interacts directly with the autonomic base. It is the shock absorber for change initiatives, as well as a monitor for ongoing operations. Mid-management is the bridge function. Change initiatives are likely, but will tend to be modest in scope. Senior management is the change agent. People at this level tend to have more ideas and are willing to act more aggressively than our other organizational levels. Top management is the level most focused on new ideas and approaches. but they are only modestly inclined to strongly press for their implementation. And the glue binding the whole thing together is the 80 to 90% overlap in strategic style elections between levels. At any point in time, the average person in an organization will see merit in the way an issue is being approached, even if they do not agree with the action taken to address that issue. The organizations in our sampled population, taken together, are seen by this research as a viable ecosystem. It has the ability to absorb disruptions and a capacity to sustain itself into the future. This analysis has allowed us to construct this integrated system with defined and measurable components. But of what practical value does it have? Well, that depends on the question that you want to ask. For example, you could trace the likely response to a specific change initiative using the measurements of a particular organization. We can even do macro policy level analysis applicable to the system as a whole. For example, we now know that a majority of our sampled population relies on detailed factual input. We also know that these people tend to value certainty in their preferred output. Programs of misinformation can disrupt their strategy to a point of frustration. If this were to occur at a severe level, the likely response will be to demand a return to order at any price, and that price can be quite high. This research has provided an evidence-based tool, a framework that can be used to advance or retard with equal ease. But that is the nature of any such tool. When designing interventions using this tool, keep in mind that the system itself is what is being preserved, not its individual components. Individual people and/or specific firms may rise or fall in service of this system-level goal. Thank you for viewing this video. If you would like to learn more about IOP technology, please visit our websites at iop.com or oeinstitute.org. Both sites have much more information on IOP and the areas where it has or can be applied.